Uninformed immigrants are at a huge disadvantage in court, in financial and legal matters, and also sometimes in life. Well, what can we do about it? I'll tell you what. We can train, teach, inspire, and empower immigrants to maximize their lives regardless of their immigration status. And that's exactly what we're going to do here. I am your immigration lawyer and host, Otis Landerholm, and this is the Empowered Immigrant Podcast. Welcome to the Empowered Immigrant Podcast. I am your host, Otis Landerholm. I'm really happy to be with you here today. Thank you for joining me. My quote for today's podcast is, "No risk, no reward." And I hope you caught our last episode. In our last episode, we discussed risk and how to be empowered in the face of risk. Well, today I'm going to be talking about asylum. And asylum is perhaps the riskiest of all immigration laws. Remember, asylum is when we're fleeing for our lives and we're asking for legal protection to allow us to stay in the United States, even if we don't have a visa, or even if we don't have a green card, or even if we've somehow violated the terms of our visa. And the risk involved with asylum is if you file and if ultimately your case is denied, a judge will order you deported. And so it's important to know that going into it, and it's important to understand that, yes, that is a serious risk. And during this episode, I'm going to be giving my number one tip to be empowered through that process, all right? But first, I want to talk about, okay, what is asylum law? The law was passed in the Geneva Convention in 1951, which was talking about, really, it was right after World War II, and it was talking about how can we prevent immigrants who are fleeing from situations similar to what the Jews were experiencing in Nazi Germany. How can we prevent people being deported back to places like Nazi Germany, where they're going to be facing torture, genocide, death, concentration camps, horrible, atrocious human rights violations and abuses? And so that was the context during which kind of the asylum legal regime started, all right? And so, in my opinion, it started with a benevolent aim, like how can we protect immigrants that are facing torture and incredible abuse. And so that's where it started. And then fast forward until today, we have people that are fleeing violence all over the world, and there are people who are, very much in danger in their countries, and they flee a border seeking protection. And now the question is, does U.S. asylum law adequately protect those people? And so let's examine that as we go through the law right now. U.S. asylum law allows for protection, allows for an immigrant to gain legal status in the United States if that immigrant can show the following things. First, they've got to show that they have a quote-unquote well-founded fear, meaning it's not just that they're afraid to go back, but that fear is objectively, quote-unquote, reasonable, or objectively kind of identifiable, all right? A well-founded fear. The second requirement is that it has to be a fear of persecution. And we can talk about how the law defines, quote-unquote, persecution. The third requirement is that persecution must be, quote-unquote, on account of, and then the fourth requirement, it's got to be on account of one of these 5 things. All right. And so I'm going to go through them quickly. The first is your race. The second is your religion. The third is your political opinion. The fourth is your nationality. And the fifth is your membership in a quote unquote particular social group. So to say all of that, if you have a well-founded fear of persecution on account of your race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or your membership in a particular social group, then and only then can you qualify for asylum. So, okay, that's clear enough, simple enough, right? But let's look at situations that are happening in the world right now. Right now there is a drug war, and there are drugs. 80% of the world's supply of cocaine comes from Colombia. All right, and the Amazon region, right? Colombia, Peru, a little bit of Ecuador. And in order for that cocaine, that substance, to make its way to the United States, it's got to pass, right? It's got to go through Panama and then Guatemala and El Salvador and Honduras and Nicaragua and Mexico, all right, on its route towards the United States, which is the number one purchaser of drugs, number one purchaser of cocaine, all right? And unfortunately, as this substance moves towards the United States, it carries with it an insane amount of violence. I can't tell you the number of clients that we've had, but a lot from Central America and Mexico who have been horrifically abused, mistreated, threatened. I've represented one man who has been shot, and we actually have more than one, but I'm thinking one in particular who still has a bullet lodged in between his spine and his shoulder blade, and the doctors are afraid to remove it because it could paralyze him. And all of this is in the name of drug violence. And the problem is that the gangs, the narco trafficking gangs that are bringing the substance up through Central America, they they're causing a horrific amount of violence. And so if you're caught in that situation, you might say, hey, I'm going to get the heck out of this country, right? I'm going to get the heck out of this city, right? Because people are after me, all right? And we've had so many clients that's really the situation. If they go back to their country, those people are going to kill them for whatever reason, all right? Whether it was because they stood up to them and said, no, I'm not going to deliver that package to such and such a place, or if it was, hey, they were demanded such and such a ransom to try and get money to fund all these smuggling operations. People who refuse to cooperate with the bad guys, they get mistreated really bad. And so that's happening, and that's real. But imagine that person who has said no, they're not going to help some narco trafficking gang deliver some package of whatever to the next town. And now they're afraid for their life to be where they are, and they've got to run. Imagine that person makes it to the United States, and imagine they request asylum. Well, the problem is, let's look again at asylum law, all right? Does that person have a well-founded fear of persecution on account of their race? Are the narcos and the criminal organizations targeting anybody on account of their race? I mean, maybe, but it's uncommon. All right. Would he be fleeing? And does he have a fear of persecution on account of his religion? Are the narcos targeting certain people from certain religious backgrounds? I mean, not really. All right. Certainly not in the same way that Nazi Germany was targeting Jews, right? Not at all, right? Would that person be fleeing on account of his nationality? Is it his political opinion? Is it his quote unquote membership in a particular social group? Like, what is it? All right. Well, yeah, that's exactly the problem. The problem is that the law limits, categorizes, all right, these people and their situations into one of these five things. And if it doesn't fit into one of these five things, then it's like it's not an asylum case. All right. And it's not going to be an easy asylum case at all. All right. And the bottom line is that a lot of people who are fleeing from like gang violence or drug related violence, they end up coming here, they end up filing for asylum, and they end up losing. All right. And it's like, gosh, you know, the law is there to protect people who are afraid for their lives to return to their home country. And yet it's not protecting them because they're losing their cases because the law, I believe, is too rigid. All right. I believe it's too rigid. It's too inflexible. Just to give you an idea, last year, all right, let me get the exact stats if I can. Fiscal year 2019, judges decided 67,406 asylum cases, nearly 2.5 times the number from 5 years ago. All right. 5 years ago in 2014, judges decided 19,000 asylum cases. And asylum, let's see. I'm sorry, I'm reading from Track Immigration, which is direct data from the US government. It says, however, the number of immigrants who have been denied asylum or other relief grew even faster, all right? 69% of asylum seekers were denied asylum or other relief in 2019. That's to say that of the vast majority of people who come into the United States afraid for their lives, fleeing from violence in their home country, and then they actually put themselves into the process, they end up losing and they get deported. All right. And, you know, that is way up, and that is way higher than it used to be. All right. It was just it was around 40% just back in 2012. And now it's about 70% of people getting their cases denied. All right. So it's incredibly risky. And here we are. We talked about how to be empowered in the face of risk. We talked about risk, right? Well, we've also been talking about empowerment. Let me talk a little bit about why, in my opinion, asylum is disempowering, all right? First of all, it's risky because if you file and if you lose, you'll be subject to deportation. But second of all, as you go through an asylum process, you got to be aware of this. As you go through an asylum process, you're going to have to recount all the ways that your country is bad. All the ways, you know, you've got to remember, you've got to relive all the bad memories that you've ever faced in your home country in order to win your case. Because without that, you're going to lose, all right? And so, okay, we've talked about asylum, which in my opinion is one of the riskiest and one of the most disempowering areas of immigration law. And so what is my tip to be empowered through the asylum process? My real tip is understand the risks involved before you get started and choose it despite them. All right, I'm going to say that again. Understand the risks involved before you start the asylum process and choose the asylum process despite those risks. Understand the risks and choose it. What I'm saying is go in with both eyes open. And if you understand that it's a risky process and hey, you might lose and you might be subject to deportation, but that's not going to stop you from requesting the benefit that you feel that you're eligible for. If you can come to an asylum process like that, where you're saying, hey, no matter what happens in the future, if a judge grants my case or denies my case, I know I'm doing the right thing by me because I'm going for it, and I want immigration status, and I want to do things right, and I want to get a work permit, and I want to take care of my life and my future and my family potentially also. Like, I'm going to go for it no matter what the risks. If you can go into the process like that, with that kind of mental energy going into it, all right, you will have more success in the process, all right? And you'll be able to face the challenges that are going to come at you in immigration court with a different level of resolve. And the truth is yes, asylum processes are risky. Yes, 70% of cases are being denied right now. Yes, if you are ultimately denied, you can be ordered deported. But that doesn't mean that we can't appeal the decisions. It doesn't mean that we can't file for asylum, try to get you a work permit after 6 months, which the law allows, can fight at every level of every argument that we can possibly make. If we lose, appeal. If we lose on the appeal again. And during this time in the United States, maybe if some other law passes or if something changes in your life, maybe look for some other alternative to help you instead, right? There's lots of things that can be done to maximize your chances of reaching your immigration goals long term. But the key is to understand that sometimes asylum is a long-term play, right? It is often denied at the first stage, all right? And sometimes we have to pivot and find some other option for you, all right? And sometimes, unfortunately, even that's not possible. And sometimes you just end up getting deported, all right? But if you can go in and say, hey, being here and in an asylum process is safer than being there, subject to danger or violence or persecution, then hey, maybe it is worth that risk. The question is for you, and it's a personal question, when is it worth the risk? And that brings us back to the quote of the day, and that is no risk, no reward. But the question is that reward worth it? And if it is, great, let's go for it. Is immigration status in the United States worth the risk to you? And that's a personal question, and only you can answer it. And if it is, go for it. And if it's not, then, then don't. It's as simple as that. And to know what the risk is, well, then it's like, okay, it's worth it to meet with an immigration lawyer to really evaluate your situation and see how strong your case is or how risky your case is. Because obviously the stronger the case is, the more the risks go down. I hope this was helpful. No risk, no reward. Where is a risk in your life that you want to go for? And where could you bring just a little bit of preliminary research and preliminary, call it a consultation, or really it's just figuring out what the reward would be and what the risks are involved, so you can choose and do your cost-benefit analysis. Because ultimately in life, no risk, no reward. Thank you for listening to this. I'm Otis Landerholm. This is the Empowered Immigrant Podcast. Please follow and please like our podcasts if you found them useful. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a wonderful rest of your day. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to the Empowered Immigrant Podcast. If you like what you heard and if you want to learn more, please go to landerholmimmigration.com/podcast.